Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Tuesday, December 16, 2025, and we have a European continent in crisis. NATO is over. They have the European leaders, European media is proclaiming the death of NATO. Now, is this really the case? Has it died? And if it died, who is responsible for that death? Certainly, the European countries are pointing a finger across the Atlantic towards a capital called Washington as the culprit of the death of NATO. So we're going to analyze this topic a little bit and see who's responsible for the death of NATO and what is going on. Why are these European leaders and media so vociferous on the death of NATO? So let's get right into it. Here's an interview from Times Radio. And so this topic comes up. This is starting at minute, I think it's 3:05 and ends around 4. So I'll play a little bit of this interview, then we'll go into the analysis of the data, and then finally we will listen to the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and what he has to say, and then we'll come to some conclusions. So anyway, it should become obvious by the time we get to the end who's responsible and what they need to do if they really want NATO to survive. So here we go with this interview.
If they can find some way of basically giving Ukraine that guarantee which comes short of NATO membership, could that be the way forwards?
I think, in a way, NATO is a bit of a red herring because NATO is no longer what it was. NATO is fundamentally a kind of institutional means of funneling American combat power into the defense of Europe in a way that makes adversaries think, don't touch Europe. And I just don't think we're in that era anymore. I don't think, from northern Norway through to Turkey, I don't think anyone really thinks that in the event of a big crisis, you invoke Article 5, and next thing is you have American F-35s blasting your opponents to smithereens. And just imagine the phone going in the White House in the middle of the night, and the American Supreme Commander saying, I need to start killing Russians now, is that okay, sir? And the Commander-in-Chief saying, yeah, go ahead. I think so. I think, in a way, NATO's over.
So NATO is over because the leaders in Washington would refuse to send F-35s to attack Moscow or St. Petersburg. This is the main point of this interview. Basically, we can't count on Washington to go attack Russia, to go attack Moscow and St. Petersburg with F-35s and everything that they have, to blast them to smithereens. So this is the point being made here on the Times Radio interview. NATO is over. So let's take a look at troop levels in Europe since 1970. First, we'll start with Germany. Germany had over 700,000 troops in 1970. That was just West Germany. That was before the reunification. 2025, we have 184,000 troops. That's a drop of 75% of their troops. And that was before, like I say, that was before the reunification. So Germany certainly has the potential for a lot more than 700,000. France, we had 570,000 troops in 1970. We don't have 2025, but we have 2015 number, around 215,000. That is a drop of over 60%, I believe. And if we go to Italy, just another example here, we have in 1970, 435,000 troops, and 2015, 176,000. So that's a drop of, again, over 60%. So we have a drop of 75% in Germany, drop of over 60% in France, drop of over 60% in Italy. As far as money goes, the U.S. is still putting in the lion's share of money into NATO. The 2025 estimate is that the U.S. will put in $845 billion versus $559 billion for all the countries in NATO minus the USA. So all those countries put together, they're not even equal on a par with the United States. They're 66%, basically 2/3 of what the U.S. is putting in. So what the administration of President Donald Trump said to the European countries was that your financial commitment isn't high enough. You need to. So they put them a goal of 5% for each country. So I don't know if that would get us to, 100%, even Steven between the USA and all the other countries put together. But you think if that NATO was there to defend European countries, it would be in the interest of the European countries to increase, to have more investment in NATO than USA, which is on the other side of the Atlantic. So, but anyway, the point here is that the United States has far more investment in NATO than these NATO countries themselves. So finally, we took a look at the U.S. bases in Europe. The number was very high in the 70s. It's dropped down, and then now it's rising again. So, and there's, I believe, around 40 U.S. bases being built in the Nordic countries, in Norway, Sweden, and Finland. So there isn't any lack of commitment on the United States to NATO, neither in troops, nor money, nor bases. So what happened? If we go back to 1985, that was a key year. We had Mikhail Gorbachev. He introduced glasnost, openness, and perestroika restructuring. The Soviet Union was on its last legs. It was at the emergency room, and it was going towards life support. So it was having assisted breathing. The Western countries started to pour money in to try to keep the Soviet Union afloat, and it wasn't working. So anyway, the European countries saw, hey, this patient is in death row, or is basically on a death watch, and we don't really need to worry too much about the Soviet Union anymore. So the European countries started to drop off their troop levels substantially, anywhere between 1985 and 1995. And so you go back to this point from the Times radio, NATO was over because the U.S. is no longer committed to NATO. That is a total lie. If you just take a look at the statistics, and the European countries basically checked out of the hotel, in 40 years ago. So they've left for 40 years, and suddenly they're raising their hands up in the air when NATO is actually needed. And their lack of commitment over a period of years, the lack of industrialization of their military equipment like tanks, armored cars, helmets, body gear, guns, bullets, all that has dropped off substantially. These European countries, they don't have the soldiers to put on the front line. They don't have the military equipment to compete with modern military equipment. So who has not had the commitment to NATO? Has it been the USA, or has it been the European countries? So finally we get to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and he's going to bring us the biggest wisdom of the day. So let's listen to a few of his words. It's in German, and there is a translation that appears on the screen. I'll read the text off. So here we go with him. So he said, the decades of the Pax Americana are largely over for us in Europe.
Der Pax Americana sind für uns in Europa und auch für uns in Deutschland.
And also for us in Germany. So he's saying the Pax Americana is over. So based on what? What is he talking about? The U.S. is putting in, they have bases all over Europe. They have soldiers all over Europe, all the way from from the northern parts of Europe down to Naples, Italy. There's naval bases, there's Air Force bases, there's Army bases. The U.S. is putting in money. The U.S. has backed up the European countries during their times of difficulty. The U.S. has filled in the holes, that of where the European countries had potholes. So the U.S. went in and repaired their roads, so to speak, made it look nice and shiny and new. And here they are complaining about the Pax Americana being over. The USA is abandoning ship. I don't see that. In fact, if you take a look at Germany, drop of 75% of troop levels. France, over 60% drop in troop levels. Italy, over 60% drop in troop levels. The money, the U.S. is putting in the lion's share of money. So I don't get it. I don't see what he's talking about. But basically, you get to the point of what is the whole deal here, and the deal is that the European countries want the U.S. to give a Article 5 security guarantee to Ukraine, a country which isn't even a member of NATO. You need to be a full-fledged member of NATO to be given the Article 5 security guarantee. So NATO is over because the United States isn't willing to give an Article 5 guarantee to a country that's not even a member of NATO. And the other point is the European countries want to put some limited troops on the ground in Ukraine, and they want to have the United States as the backdrop to put an Article 5 guarantee to those European troops. So they put those troops somewhere near the front line, I don't know, operating artillery, operating missiles, operating, surveillance equipment, operating drones, and so they want some kind of Article 5 guarantee so that the moment that Russia hits some drone, European drone operators, some European artillery individuals that are fighting, that suddenly the United States comes in riding their horses in through Poland into Ukraine, and they save the situation for the Europeans. The U.S. is saying, hey, we're not going to do that. That's like, you're walking down the street with somebody and you pass a bar and your buddy he's not very tall, he's not very strong, and not very smart. And so he sees this bar and says, you know what, my friend, you're big and strong and powerful. I'm none of that. But I'm going to go into that bar and I'm going to find the biggest, strongest, rudest, most aggressive individual there. And I'm going to poke that person in the eye. And I'm going to call his mom every kind of name. And he's not going to attack me because you're going to stand behind me because you're bigger, stronger, ruder, and more powerful than that other individual. And the U.S. is basically saying, no, we're not going to play that game. You want to go into the bar and pick a fight with somebody twice your size who, basically would win in 30 seconds or less, and you want me to go in and back you up. Why? Because you feel like going into a bar and fighting someone, but more than that, you want to see that person destroyed, and you want to see me do that. I'm not going to do that. So basically now Europe is saying NATO is over because I can't go into bars anymore and pick fights with people and have the United States rush in to unload all its strength and power onto this individual. So this is totally ridiculous. Is this what NATO is coming to now? Just a bunch of crybabies that just cry for help every time they pick a fight with someone twice their size, and they feel, oh, now I'm in trouble. I need someone to save me. So the United States it's their obligation to save us. No, it's not the United States obligation to save you. You want to go in and pick a fight with someone that's your your risk, and it'd be danger to you to do that. I'm not going to come in and save you. So that is the response of the United States, and in Europe is basically saying, well, then NATO is over. And this sounds like somebody who wanted I don't know an 18-year-old who wanted a Porsche 911 with a spoiler on their birthday, and you decided you were going to get them a small Toyota and they're saying, I'm not going to accept that. Either you give me the Porsche 911, or I'm not going to love you anymore. And that's basically what Europe is saying. They're saying our relationship is over because you're not willing to back me up in some lame, unnecessary bar fight that I want to pick a fight. So now these European countries are so focused on destroying Russia, they've lost all sense of composure. They're starting to lose their marbles. This comment from Mertz is totally uncalled for. And you take a look at the German troop levels. What has happened to the German military? They've decided to lower their troop levels because they didn't want to pay. And they wanted the United States to pay, so they didn't want to pay, and they didn't want to maintain all that military. They didn't want to maintain the industrial production of everything they needed for their military. They just wanted the United States to be there when it was needed to back them up. So, if this is what it's coming to, NATO is basically a bunch of crybabies crying to the United States. Every time they get into a bar fight with someone twice their size, now they got a bloody nose and they're running, calling out to daddy or whoever, their friend, save me, and the U.S. is saying basically, no, we're not, and the U.S. is saying, grow up, and the European countries are using their leaders and all their media and everything they have at their disposal just to say how worthless NATO is. That NATO isn't to, create conflicts, especially ones you can't win, because when this goes nuclear, no one wins. So anyway, that is my report on the NATO is over. If anything, NATO is as alive as it's ever been. The fall off in troop levels happened between 85 and 95. So for 30 to 40 years, the European countries have been asleep. They woke up from a sleep and they're pointing fingers everywhere. The problem isn't us, it's you. So anyway, the U.S. is saying, grow up and start putting in, your part. And of course, the U.S. could always walk away from NATO, but it won't. So these countries will continue to cry wolf and continue to push for totally unadvisable actions on the part of the United States. And we may, in a fit of rage, we may see President Trump decide to do something stupid like they're asking him to do. But anyway, for the moment, I don't see that happening. And does that mean that NATO is over? Of course not. You take a look at the money amount. This is huge. These are huge amounts of money. Then you have to take into account the bases, the soldiers, maintaining the equipment. So is NATO over? No. Will NATO be over soon? No. Are the European leaders crybabies? Yes. Are European countries immature? Yes, of course. They're not willing to take their share of responsibility. They're not willing to roll up their sleeves and do the work. They want the USA to do all that. And the USA is saying, no, we've got things to this point, but, you got to roll up your sleeves too. Is that, asking someone to do their part, is that too much? So anyway, I find this whole effort on the part of the European leaders and media to be totally lame. Nobody believes them, and but they could just continue to beat a dead horse if they want to. We'll see this continue on, but anyway, this concludes my video. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care. Bye bye.